Julius Caesar once said something about Cato that his enemies used against him for the rest of his life. He said, "I envy Cato his death." Think about what that means. The most powerful man in the world, a man who had conquered Gaul, crossed the Rubicon, defeated Pompey, and made himself effectively the dictator of Rome, envied a man he had defeated politically, a man who had no army, no power, no empire. He envied him his death. Because in that death, Cato had done something Caesar could never do. He had refused. Completely. Finally. Without compromise. In a world where everything could be bought, Cato was not for sale. In a world where every man had a price, Cato demonstrated that some men don't. And that is what made Caesar afraid of him. Not his army, not his political support, not his wealth. The fact that he could not be moved. Today, Marcus Porcius Cato, known as Cato the Younger to distinguish him from his great-grandfather, was born in 95 BC. He came from a family with a reputation for virtue. His great-grandfather, Cato the Elder, was already legendary for his strict morality and refusal to be corrupted by the Greek culture that was sweeping Rome. Young Cato absorbed this legacy completely. There are stories from his childhood that tell you exactly who this man would become. When he was 14 years old, he was visiting the dictator Sulla with his tutor. He watched as men who had displeased Sulla were brought in and executed, their heads displayed in the Forum. Other boys were horrified and silent. Cato turned to his tutor and asked, "Why does no one kill this man? Why do the people allow this?" His tutor reportedly said, "Because they fear him more than they hate him." Cato asked to be given a sword, not out of childish bravado, out of a genuine moral clarity that most adults never develop. He believed that tyranny should be resisted, that silence in the face of evil was complicity, that there was a difference between surviving and living, and that survival without integrity was not worth having. These were not abstract beliefs. He lived them every day of his life. As a young man in the army, he refused the special treatment his family name could have bought him. He ate the same food as his soldiers, slept in the same conditions, marched the same distances. His men loved him for it. Not because he was easy, because he was fair. When he served as a treasury official, the accounts were spotless for the first time in a generation. He personally memorized every entry. He personally verified every claim. Not because someone was watching, because it was right. This is the man who would eventually face Julius Caesar. In the Roman Senate, corruption was so common, it was almost not considered corruption anymore. Senators accepted gifts, made deals, traded favors, looked the other way when powerful men did things that should not be looked away from. It was simply how things worked. And then Cato arrived. He was different in a way that made everyone uncomfortable. He could not be bribed, not because he was offered too little. he was offered a great deal. He refused it all. He could not be flattered. People tried. He was unmoved. He could not be intimidated. Powerful men threatened him, directly and indirectly. Julius Caesar was everything Cato was not. Brilliant, charming, flexible, ambitious in ways that had no ceiling. Caesar understood politics the way a master understands a game. He knew which rules to follow, which to bend, which to break, and when. He built alliances, made deals, spent money he didn't have to buy loyalty he needed. And it worked. For decades, it worked spectacularly. Cato watched Caesar's rise with a clarity that no one else seemed to have. While others were dazzled by Caesar's gifts, his military genius, his rhetoric, his generosity, Cato saw something underneath. He wrote about it, spoke about it in the Senate. He said Caesar was building towards soul. If this story is gripping you, subscribe and hit the bell. I make these every week. The full story of Cato is just getting to its most important chapter. After Caesar's victory at the Battle of Thapsus in 46 BC, it was over. The last Republican forces were crushed. Caesar controlled everything. Almost everyone surrendered. Some fled. Most simply accepted the new reality and tried to negotiate terms. Caesar was merciful. He had a policy of clemency. He would pardon his enemies. He would bring them back into the fold. He sent word to Cato in Utica, the city in North Africa where Cato had retreated. Come back. All is forgiven. Accept my mercy. Cato spent the evening reading. He had organized the evacuation of as many people as possible from Utica, ensuring ships and provisions for those who wanted to escape Caesar's Rome. He hosted a dinner for his officers. He was calm. I want to spend a moment on what Cato read that final night. The Phaedo, Plato's dialogue, in which Socrates, hours before his own execution, discusses the immortality of the soul with his friends. This was not a random choice. Socrates had faced the same decision Cato was facing. Accept compromise. Change what you believe to survive, or remain fully yourself at the cost of your life. Socrates chose death. And in the Phaedo, he does it with such complete peace that it reads not as a tragedy, but as a triumph. He tells his weeping friends, "Where are your philosophers? I thought we had established that death is nothing to fear." He dies mid-sentence, still teaching. Cato read this twice. And then, now, what does this mean for your life? Because Cato is not just a historical figure. He is an argument, a demonstration of something real. The argument is this: there is a version of you that exists independently of your circumstances. I want to ask you a question before we close. Who is your Caesar? Not a person necessarily, though it might be. But what is the thing, the circumstance, the pressure, the fear that is asking you to be something you are not? What is the compromise that feels reasonable enough that you've been considering it? What is the small trade that has a much larger price than it appears? Cato's answer, always, was no. Not dramatic refusal, not performance of virtue. Just no. Quietly, consistently, every single day. Because he had decided, long before the decision mattered, who he was going to be. And when the moment came, there was nothing to decide. The Stoics call this preparation, the daily practice of clarifying your values, so that when circumstances test them, you already know what you'll do.